Okay, so this is a tutorial about how to use the Linb JavaScript and the Sigma Visual Ajax GUI builder to create front ends on web and mobile devices for a Rebol backend server. You can download the Sigma Ajax UI builder by going to SourceForge. If you type in Sigma Visual Builder in Google, you'll come up to the SourceForge page. Download. We're going to use this old version. This is from 2009, Sigma Visual Builder 2.02 full. Download that, and then you don't need to really run this on a server. It can run really on any device, but you get a lot of extra features if you install it on a server. So I'm on Windows. I'm going to use the Uniform server. And again, this is a WAMP distribution. I'm going to use an old version here. It's only 6 megs. You'll see both of these downloads are just about 6 megs. Get this download going. Once they get downloaded, we're going to unzip them to the C drive. Put this on the desktop here, and we're going to unzip each of these things. Don't have to do any installation. The Sigma Visual Builder will unzip into a folder in the Uniform server. Start up the Uniform server, and you can see I'm using version 3.3 here. Basically, any server setup will work. We'll unpack this to a folder on the C drive. And again, you do not need to do the server install, but you get a lot of nice little extras. There are some PHP files that come with the Sigma Visual Builder that give you some really nice IDE features. To clarify the names here, this project, Sigma Ajax Builder, contains a library named jsLinb. It's L-I-N-B, JavaScript Linb. And part of that library, and one of the applications built on the library, is this little, it's basically an IDE. It's a visual builder that runs directly in a browser, and it's all JavaScript with some little PHP helper programs to complete the IDE. It's called Sigma Visual Builder, or here it's called Sigma Ajax UI Builder. This little application, the UI Builder, runs basically everywhere. You can run it all the way back to Internet Explorer 6, Firefox 1.5. You can run it in basically every version of Android in the default browser that comes with Android. And where we want to put this is in the folder for the server that we just created. So that unpacked into Uniform server. If you go down here into disk W, you'll see a www folder, and we're going to stick it right in the www folder. And so this is just a typical setup for a web server on any machine. You can do this on a Linux machine, a Mac. Use whatever server you're familiar with. You can do this also directly on a production server. I've used Lunar Pages, HostGator, and basically any server. I've also got a couple of little Android apps that work just as well with it, that set up a server on a PHP environment on your Android. It works just fine there. So I just like the Uniform server because it's very small. Obviously, the download in total, along with MySQL, which is not needed for this, but in total with MySQL and PHP and a CGI server, is 6 megs to download. You can see it It's really, really quick to set up. Comes with these little batch files. Click the server start bat to get it going. I'll go ahead and do that now. Oops, I already have one running here. I'm going to close that other one. And start the batch file, and close this other one down. And that gets the server running. And you'll see it will open up a browser window and redirect you to the control panel there. One more time. And when the extraction wizard is done for the jsLinb and Sigma builder, we can go into the www folder, and that's our localhost. So anything we put in localhost will appear, or everything we put in www will appear on localhost. So uniform server, we can set up a couple more things now. I'm going to go into this is the folder we extracted the uniform server to. I'm going to go in, and you see there's a CGI folder. By default, uniform server, this old version, comes with Perl and some other things. We're going to go ahead and stick our Rebol interpreter there. So on your normal production server, wherever you put your Rebol interpreter, and on whatever operating system, just use the Rebol interpreter that's appropriate for your operating system. Here we've got Rebol Core interpreter. I'm going to copy that over to the www folder, or I'm sorry, into the CGI folder, and fix that there. And I got a couple of CGI scripts here already made up that I'm going to use to demonstrate some of these techniques, and we're going to copy those and paste those over. We'll go through the code in those. They're really small, really simple scripts. And I've got a bunch of Sigma code files here also that we're going to paste into the uniform, or into the Sigma builder once this is done. So still unpacking there. We can do a quick little test. If we go to the CGI folder on our localhost, and CGI, then let's try. So these now are actually in the C drive in the uniform server. They're being served from the CGI bin folder. Let's try this little create JSON CGI. If we go to the uniform server, you should see in the CGI bin directory, this should give us a little bit of data. Let's make sure we're pointing to the right place. Okay, so actually the Rebol needs to be put on this uniform server, needs to be put into this folder here, the bin folder. Copy that and paste it, and there's Perl. So that's the right folder. Try this again. And there we go. So we got a working Rebol application. And that's just some Rebol code. Let's take a look at that code really quickly. Go back up in our CGI folder, and this little create JSON script is just all pure Rebol, and it's just creating from a little data series some JSON, and then printing that JSON out. We're going to use that data later on in one of the Sigma builder applications. So our unzipping process is going here. We're almost done. Okay, so in order to get to the Ajax builder, once it installs, we'll rename that folder. I'm going to rename it to Sigma in our www folder, and the index page in that folder has a bunch of information about the Sigma builder, and it has links to all the documentation. This thing is really well documented. You can look at all the library functions with just thousands of little examples that show you how to use each of those events and properties um, and methods that are available. There's a little quick manual. It's a 5-minute read that shows you how to sort of operate the visual builder, copy and paste and drag things around. And there are a whole bunch of examples. We'll go through some of these examples, and there are some really big, complete examples that show you really how to do complex things with the builder. And there's also, in those samples, a code snips application. And that code snips application lets you look at all the code that you need to do things with each of the UI elements, all the widgets. Okay, so we are now in the www folder. I'm just going to call that Sigma, rename that. So now if we go there in our localhost, we should come up. There's our home page. Let's refresh it and make sure it's good. Okay, so now we have the builder, and you can get right to the builder by clicking the Try It Now link. And this is the builder. This will run in any web browser from Internet Explorer 6. I've got actually Internet Explorer version 7 here, and it'll run in Firefox from version 1.5. That's such an old version of Firefox, they didn't even have tabbed browsing in that version. From 2000, I think it's from 2005. And the actual version of Sigma Builder that we're using is from 2009. So you can see this runs, this little application runs the same way, exactly the same way in Internet Explorer as it does in, I'm using the most recent version of Chrome. It also runs directly in a phone, so you can use this builder system, put it on your production server, or put it on a server that runs on your Android, and you've got the entire development and deployment system, not just the applications it creates, but the entire deployment system running directly. Here it is running in Internet Explorer, old version. So these browsers that are notoriously hard to support, this thing works exactly the same. And it's really simple to use. So when you open it up, you see there's a couple tabs here. The design view allows you to click and drag items, little widgets, and there's a little inspector over here. You can sort of click on the things that are in the main canvas. You can select them, move them around just like you would in Visual Basic or Delphi or any of the typical visual builders. And if you go over to this, what they call normal view, you see all of the code that makes up your application, and this is all of it. This is everything that's required for your application to run, this single page application to run. So you can copy and paste this into a text editor. There are a couple of items here that aren't needed. So you can see this is sort of a minimal application. Right now it doesn't do anything, but we can switch back and forth between the design view, and anything we do in the design view gets added to the code view. So now you can see here it says code created by the UI builder. This is all just added, and this code is really easy to read. Basically, any UI element that is added to the design view is added to the code with an append function. So they create this little append function here, and as we add elements, you can see how easy this code is to read. We just get more and more items added to that little area. So I can add a bunch of things here and go back and forth, and you can see they're just getting added to the code. And we can sort of edit these round trips. So for example, if I want to change what that button says, let's make it say button number 1, go back into the design view, and now that says button number 1. You can make changes also to any of the properties or any of the events associated with any of the widgets by clicking over here on the little property editor And so, for example, we have that caption again. Let's change that to, say, button 1, and you'll see it's reflected in the visual editor. If we go back to the code view, it's edited in the code. So you can sort of go round trip between the code view, and if you want to just take all that code and copy and paste it into a text file, save it on whatever platform you're in. You can also use any editors that you're familiar with or IDEs and edit the code there and send it back into Sigma Builder, and you don't have any separate files. It's all just one file. When you're ready to run your application, click Run, and it opens in another tab, and you get that application that you just created. So really easy to go back and forth and edit. When you're ready to save the application and move it to a server, you can click the Save button here, and there are a bunch of options. If you've opened this from the server, you can save it back to the file. If you choose this option, save the jsLinb class file, what will happen is you'll basically just get this entire code file saved to a JavaScript file, which of course you can edit or copy and paste back in. Let me do that a couple times here. It'll also create a runnable file, which is basically just all that JavaScript in an HTML file that you can just run. If you've got your jsLinb runtime already on your server, that's the only file you really need. You can send that to your server, point to your runtime in the HTML file, just edit that to wherever your runtime is, and your application will run. If you don't have any of that stuff already installed, you can just save a release package here as a zip file to the local disk, and that way you can take that zip file, unzip it onto your server, whether it's a local server or a production server, and it'll pack your application along with the runtime and everything else you need, all of the skin files, the image files, the colors, and all that, the appearance files that you have saved here. And it'll take that entire application and just put it on your web server. It's all of 200K or something like that, very small file. So do a couple little things here. I'm going to delete these items. Let's make a button react so you get a basic idea about how to work with events. Take these events, and if we click on events here, we'll do an on-click event, and you'll see it comes with a little function. You can edit what happens. We'll just put an alert, and we'll say though, and you can do a syntax check there. It'll tell you if you've gotten everything right. And there's not much to this. It's really simple JavaScript. The API and for Sigma, basically, for the UI Linb library, covers basically everything you'll need to make applications. You don't really need to do any other JavaScript learning. Just learn how the API works. It's really simple. Maybe knowing how to do an alert function is useful. Okay, so if we run this, you'll see we've got running now. Click on the button, and up pops the alert. So that's basically how it works, just like with any other GUI builder. What I'm going to do here is get a couple of these examples now. We've already copied a bunch of our CGI applications over into the server, and I've got a bunch of these. Are all just Sigma or jsLinb JavaScript files. So for example, we have this little minimal JavaScript. If we copy this back over, put it into the code view here, boom, we've got nothing else in design view now. That's the entire application that's sitting in that code view file, and we can run it, and you'll see that that's a valid application, although it does nothing. No errors. Here, for example, is the say hi, this little thing, application, say hello. Here's one that is basically what we just did. You can see here a button has been appended. I'll call it maybe button number 1. Has been appended. Caption says say hi, and the on-click function goes down here, and here's that what we want it to do. The function is button 12 on-click, and what that function does is puts up an alert that says hi. So if we copy all this into the builder, put it right in the code view. Again, that's the entire application. Go into design view. Now we can see we've got a button. The caption is say hi, which of course we can change. And the event that we have assigned to that, which was in the code, as you saw, is this little function which alerts hello. And so again, the format for that, over here in the ini components function, you have anything that's appended. So all of our GUI widgets are going to be in this area right here, and you'll just see them all appended, and you can set the properties and the events in the code, and those are reflected directly in the editor. Okay, so the on-click event for this button 1, is going to fire the button 12 on-click function down here. So all the stuff that's contained in the design view with all the properties and events is completely contained in that little bit of code. So click on Run, and you've got a working application. So to wire this up to Rebol server, I'll get a couple of these apps open here. We'll do something really simple. I did a similar kind of say hi script, where all I did was took away all the UI elements and basically just when the application's ready, it runs this onReady function, which also alerts hi. So let's do that, watch that work really quickly. If you go back to the design view, see there's nothing in that application. There are no appended GUI widgets. Run it. And when that application opens, it alerts hi. We'll use that to build our first little Rebol script and interface with the first Rebol script. So I've got this little application here called Rebol Say Hi, and you can see the only real difference between this, I don't really need any of these things, is the onReady function now is using this little Linb Ajax method. The Linb Ajax method is the main way you get data back and forth between the application and the server. And what you can do is point it to a script. In this case, it's one of these scripts that we put on our server, stored in the CGI bin folder. And this one is going to run the index sayhi.cgi. When that runs, the data that it sends back is going to be contained and dealt with in this little function, where this first argument s is going to be the data that's returned from that Ajax call. And so here we'll just alert it. So if we look at that CGI function, or that CGI script, here's the say hi script. It's a really simple Rebol say hi script. All it does is, here's our shebang showing where the Rebol interpreter is. Remember, we put that here in this folder. There's our bin. Do the Rebol header, print the content type, and all we're doing in this application is when it runs, it prints out Rebol server says hi. So that's our application, about as simple as CGI as possible. All it's doing is printing out Rebol server says hi. So when we run this function, where's that? When we run this function, it's going to go to that server script. The data will be passed back into this s variable, and we're going to alert that. So now we're actually interacting with the server. Let's put that back in our code view, run it, and if I haven't made any errors, it looks like I have actually. Let's do this again. time. Looks like I needed some here. Pass one more time. And do a syntax check. Go back into the design view, make it sure it's looking good, and run it. And now when that application runs, it's still not doing. Let's see what's going on here. Index say hi.cgi. What's going on here? Aha! That's why it's pointing to the wrong script. So let's take a quick look at this. Do this again and point it to the correct script. And copy that now back into the builder. Syntax check, good. Now we should get the data back from that script. There we go. So Rebol server says hi is what was sent by this script. So you can see we got our first connection using Ajax with a Rebol server. So of course we could do anything that we'd like with that Rebol server script. We've got a couple others here. Here's a little script called echo.cgi. Super simple again, all the little boilerplate stuff. And what this does is it reads the CGI input, reads the input sent to it, and decodes it. So we've got some Rebol data that we can use. Here all this does is it saves that data, the sent data, the raw data, the stuff that's read directly from CGI input, to a file named data.txt, and then we print it back out. So the script that's calling it, the jsLinb script, can do something with it. And basically all it's doing is taking the data that's sent to it and printing it back out. So I call this an echo.cgi script. So remember the name of that script, echo.cgi. We'll go back here and take a look at our scripts. So I have this little script called round trip. This first one is a little more basic. What we're going to do, copy and paste that code in there. If you notice, this is a little bit of an older script. When you paste the code and it gets long, you can't scroll back up. You can scroll back up to the top, but sometimes it's easier for me just to, when I'm using this, it's easier just to do Control minus a couple times and Control 0 to sort of zoom it and scroll back in. If you're on mobile, you can sort of just pinch and drag and tighten your window up and then open back up, and it'll show the top part of the script here, part of the builder. Okay, so now if we look at the design view here, what I've got is a little text input. It's an area. If we look at the properties here, you can see I've got multi-line checked. So this is a multi-line text area. There's a button here, and of course with the button I've got an on-click event, and I'm running this little function. It's called button6c. So originally it was called button6, and you can see I've got some things happening in this. Let's look at that actually in the code view. So a quick look at that function. That's what's getting run whenever the on-click event happens with that button. So let's go back here to the normal view. You can see in the code everything that you saw in the design view is reflected directly in the code, and very, very simple code to read. A day or so you can get really comfortable with this syntax. So we have a input. It's called input 1, input widget, and all the sizing and positioning, set multi-lines true. You can see that was checked in the properties, and also the value in that is set. So when we look at the design view, initially that's set here, and of course we can look at the properties of it, and you'll see that here, and you'll see that that's been set. You get the right one. Look at the properties of the text, and you'll see that the value has been set to that text. So again, you can do it in the component config, or you can do it directly in the code. Very simple association between what you see in the design view and what you see in the code. So we've got those 3 widgets, and the on-click event for button 1 is set to run this function. That function, typically all your functions appear down below here. Let's look at that. This object refers to our application. We're going to temporarily call that self down here, and then we're going to run the Linb Ajax function. We're going to call the echo CGI, and this second argument to the Linb.ajax method is some data that we send. So that could be a quoted string. In this case, what we're going to do is we're going to concatenate the value data with the value that's gotten from input number 1. So this is a method that exists for all of the input widgets, and really for any of the widgets that hold a value. As you can see, my input 1 widget is up here, and we're going to send the value that's contained in that widget along with this concatenated data equals whatever that text is. And whatever comes back from the echo CGI function, we're going to call S. And what we're going to do with that is in input 2, we're going to set the value to S. So here's input 2, and it gets set. Now, resize this here and go back to the view. If we run this, run into a little problem. Let's say we send a line of text. You can see the button worked. We sent that AJAX request. It sent the text, and it was echoed back and then displayed in this second input widget. Now, if we do a couple lines of text, suddenly we get a problem. We get back the data, but without any formatting. So if we look at that echo server application again, one of the things you saw is I wrote the raw data to data.text. And if we look at this data.text, you can see it was sent like that. So the way we get past that in the Sigma Visual Builder is, and in the jsLinb library. Again, the jsLinb library is all you really need. If you're comfortable writing this code, you don't need the Visual Builder at all. It's just a nice quick way to get the application built. I'm going to grab another one of the examples here, and it's the exact same code. You can see I called this round trip no serialize. We didn't serialize that data, which means we didn't put in all the things like new lines and other characters that were in our text. What we're going to do here is add one more function to that request. And again, what's going on here to do in the design view, it's all exactly the same. I haven't changed any other code except in that on-click event, and the function that handles the on-click event, this is all the same. It's sending it to echo or sending it to echo CGI. We just added one more function here, this _.serialize function. The only thing we've added here. So again, we're taking the value from input 1 and we're going to serialize it. Use that serialize function, and it will put in all the other things that are inside the text and do it in a way which transfers nicely. And then when we get that back, we use the unserialize function to unserialize the data that came back from the server and put that, set the UI value of input 2 back to that unserialized data. So now we run that. Looks good. Click run. And as we click on button number 1, you can see now that data is showing all the lines. If we look at that code, that raw data that was sent, now you can see, haha, we've got a whole bunch of like new lines and things that are appropriate and serialized correctly. Okay, and again, that was written, that data was just written to that data.txt file once it was decoded. Okay, so it's a good way, and it gives you a good idea about how you can actually use this to get data to the server for things like text fields and any sort of area that if you have little bits of text data they need to send back and forth, which is going to be really the overwhelming majority of the makeup of things you send back and forth between the server. That's how you do it, and it's pretty straightforward and simple. So before we go on, I'm going to show you what we've got in this little package that comes with the builder. Just show you where all the documentation is. Let's close up all these other things. On this main, we put it in the Sigma folder in our server. So our server, our publicly accessible folder is in this server www, and you can see that's where we unzipped Sigma. And again, this was all something we did directly from the beginning of the tutorial. Uniform server was unpacked, and then the Sigma folder was copied into www. You can see the layout. There's a code snip app in here which we'll look at. The Visual.js is the actual builder, and the samples folder has a ton of samples, which we'll kind of look at right now because there's some useful tools in here when you're building with this visual builder. So first of all, this home page, we're looking at our public folder. That's what we're looking at right now, is the index file. You can get to all this even if you don't have a server. You can open this up directly from your C drive, and you can even use the builder directly on your C drive. And basically everything we've been doing you can do directly in here. Now we don't have a file in there right now. So this is the same thing we're getting. That little index file is the same thing we're getting when we go to our local host and look in the Sigma directory. So you click on your builder, and you get the builder that we've been working with. If you look at some of these other links, the manual is a quick 5-page read. It shows you how to do all these moving components around and some of the basic operations on the main screen. Next thing to look at is some of these samples. The Sigma Visual Builder is actually a tool that's built on jsLinb library. And so this tool, that's what we've been working with, is an application that could be built with it could build itself, the Ajax builder. A couple of the other neat little applications, just so you can look. There's an image editor. Oops, clicked on the wrong link there. There's an image editor. If you click on the photo, you'll get the local copy of that. And you can, it shows you how to crop and add text and that sort of thing, upload photos. There's a little PHP script, but it doesn't necessarily have to connect to PHP. It can connect to anything on the back end. This whole package comes with some PHP, Java, C# scripts that will do most of the things you need to do when you're sending data back and forth, but we won't use this since we're doing everything in Rebol. There are a lot of little examples there, just to give you an idea how powerful the library is, and this thing runs exactly the same on every operating system, on every browser, old and new, and since it was made so long ago, it's really snappy, it's really quick. Lots of little widgets that go far beyond, all sorts of great little widgets that allow you to do things quickly and easily and with nice presentation. And one of the great things is all these applications can be opened up directly in the UI builder. So if you're putting this on a server, and you can run this on a production server, it doesn't have to be a local host, you can run this anywhere, in any kind of web serving environment. And there we go, we've got the actual application that we were looking at, a little demo application, and you can look at the code. Again, this is the entire application, there's nothing else needed for this. And you can do that with any of these demo apps. So there's a truly enormous amount of code. And you can sort of go fully round trip. You can open this up, look at it, open the application up in the UI builder. So here's like a nice little business type app. You can see it's got accordions, some of the little features, demonstrates, tabs, and all sorts of grids and things like that, pagination, that sort of thing. Does a really good job with just about any sort of business type application. We can open that up in the builder, and then in the builder we can adjust the code, look at the code. If you want to open up that original file in a separate window, it lets you do that. Just copy and paste that, and we can run it all directly within the system. This runs entirely in the browser. There's absolutely no native application here. This is all entirely in the browser. And so we opened it, and of course we could even package it. For example, if we want to package this, let's create a release of this little application. And what it'll do is give us a little zip that we can download. Let's take that and we'll download it to a zip file. Let's take a look at that. And we can unpack that. Get rid of this copy here. We can unpack that into a folder and copy that directly into our web server. So I'm just going to extract that here into a folder. And you can see that little zip folder contains an index.html with all of the JavaScript code that was in that app, along with the runtime, which is all of the JavaScript and also all of the images and everything that's needed to make this little system work. And so you've got your skins and everything in here. Locale, so for example, they have English and Chinese by default. Newer versions of this, which we'll cover at the end here, have lots more features, but this has been enough for me. This library is, the library itself and the builder are entirely open source. They're LGPL, so you can use it for commercial work and free. So let's take that little, let's see here, we'll go to our desktop and grab that folder, stick that into our server public file. Real file. Oops, got a document in there. Do it again. One more time. Copy that. And we'll paste it directly into www. so paste it. And now if we go to, see if I can remember what this is called, localhost, and it was what was this? jsLinb app. Let's copy that name. And you can see this entire thing now has been deployed. Up here has been deployed. That entire application's been deployed. And we've actually got it on a host. You could just as easily do that with a production server. And you can see we've got a running app. You know what? I think I put that in the wrong folder. Let's take a look at this again. And yes, it is in the wrong folder. I go back and put it in the wrong server. So one more time, put it here. Delete this old one and paste that in. Take this, copy, and paste that into our proper uniform server folder. Let's refresh that. Try this one more time. I think it might not be done copying. One more time. Looks like I may have unintentionally deleted that, so let's one more time unzip. There we go. Copy and paste that. This is turning out to be a little bit long-winded demonstration, but it's important to see how you can deploy an application. So there we go. We got the jsLinb app. There's the order management one that we just packed up. It's running now on our local host. That's the entire application. And remember, all of that application is contained entirely in the code that we saw in the builder. So you could really take just that one JavaScript file, copy and paste it, and deploy it that way. Okay, so there's some really great examples. I'm going to focus on this one. The grid editor demonstrates an interesting little tool, and what it does is it reads data from a file. And the way that looks, let's just take this here. This takes data from a local file. So our little Ajax function reads data from a folder, and I've got a copy of this all sort of made up already. The jsLinb app, and I'm going to put that in our server. Put it in our www directory. Paste that over the other one. And so now when we run this, let's run that one. This looks like host. We have here there we go. And so what this does is it reads data from that directory, and you can see there's a little bit of data here that's formatted. This is actually a tree grid, so you can sort of open subgrids on each of these rows. And what that's doing, if we go into our local host, let's take a look at that and look at the code. Again, the code is reading this data, and the serialize and unserialize, actually in this case just the unserialized function, is taking that, it's just some JSON data, which we'll look at in a second, and to put it into this grid, it's super easy. As long as the data is in the proper format, all we need to do is set the header using that unserialized data header information, and then set the rows using that unserialized rows information. So let's go look at the data here. It actually looks like this. There's our header portion of the JSON, column 1, column 2, column 3, and you can set in the header there what type of data is, what the format is, how big the file is. So if we look at that in our app, you can see there's column 1, column 2, column 3, and you can see this is text, and this is numerical information, and here we've got a checkbox, and so on. So again, let's look at that data. There we go. You can see the columns, and now here are the rows of data. You look at these rows. We've got cell 11, cell 21, so on, and then there's a sub row of data, and that contains a bunch of these sort of folding rows in the tree, and they've got some other subs here. So you can see that data matches up exactly with the tree grid. So that's the format the data needs to be in the tree grid, sort of the most complex format possible. It's a nice display, and of course these are sort of all the features that you'd expect. Very sizable. Everything fits nicely inside. This is stuck inside a block or a pane, so it doesn't move anywhere. It automatically scrolls when necessary, and the scroll bar disappears when not necessary. So it's a really nice usable grid. And this has actually got a little editor built in. If you want this app, it has a little editor built in. We're not going to bother with that. So again, the grid editor is useful. So I took that code and cut it down a little bit. Let's take a quick look at the code. You can see here's a whole bunch of stuff in the GUI. We've got a little block. The tree grid is appended into that block. Got a little div that shows some text. A couple functions for changing the grid. We're not going to bother with that. And then we unserialize the data that's received from this file. We're going to take that basic idea and use Rebol on the server to send some data, and then we're going to display that in a grid. So the first thing we're going to do is use a little Rebol app. Again, it's simplest possible CGI, boilerplate on top, and we're going to print what's read from that data file. This one is called read.jsonfile.cgi. Okay, so we've got, again, remember we copied all those CGI scripts directly into the uniform server in the CGI bin folder. And all of those, let's try that again, read JSON file. All of these point to the Rebol interpreter, which is stored down here in the bin folder. Okay. And so that's our full setup. And again, this was all entirely done from the beginning of the video, so there's nothing missed here. What we're going to do first now is create or look at a script that just takes the data read from that file on the server. So again, we're using in localhost in the CGI bin that script, and we're going to unserialize that data just like we did. And see, I cut down everything else in the script. All we've got is a tree grid. So if we copy this into the builder, get rid of this one, and control minus control 0 again gets our controls back on screen at top. Check it and look at the design view so you can see all there is on the screen. All that we've appended to the main canvas is this one little tree grid. We called it TG. So if we run this, here it is, and you can see that the data. Let's check this. A little error somehow. Read JSON file. Let's check the name of that and make sure it's correct. That looks good. Let's take a look at the read JSON file. Aha, we don't have a data file here, so let's copy that data file. Call that data.js, and we'll put that back. Copy that into our bin folder, into our CGI bin folder. Okay, so again, what our script is doing is reading that file, and the reason we got an error there is because that file didn't exist. So a really simple script, and again, that data file is what I got from the little grid editor example. So let's run this again. And this time, we've got, there we go. We got the same data that was in that file. Okay, so again, this script is really simple. It's just a tree grid in the canvas, and the onReady function that runs here runs our little Ajax call that calls this CGI script, and again, we called the return data S, we unserialized it, and then we put the header data into the header, and we put the row data into the rows. So that's all you really need to do anytime you want to use a grid. The key is getting the data into the format that we see here in this data file. So the next step is to learn how to create that data. Let's leave that open. And see here, I created another script called create JSON.cgi. And what I'm going to do here first is show you just a little script. This is called create jsLinb JSON grid data.r. What's going on here with this one is this is just a Windows desktop script. I'm running it right on my desktop, and you can see it's outputting some JSON data. So the nitty-gritty of this is basically, the point of this is to show you how to take Rebol formatted data and output it in a format that will work nicely with the Sigma Builder grid. So I got just a list of numbers here, 1 to 24, and my script is going to take this variable columns and use it to figure out where our columns are. And so divide all this up into rows of data. In this case, it's going to go 4 by 4. So what we're doing here is, if you look at the original data file, you can see there's a JSON starts out, and then the first little block here is called header, and it's got all the header information inside curly braces, separated by commas. So that's what I did here. I used a little repeat loop to go through and create all that data in exactly the format, just appending to that little text file, or that little text, that little variable header, little text string. And so we're adding to it every time. And then the next thing, I'm creating the rows, and so this logic here just goes through and creates the data file in the exact same format that you see the original file, of course, without all the nice visual formatting. But we get something. Actually, if you look at what's being formed, it's a little simpler. All I put in was an ID and a caption for the header, and I didn't have all the sub rows. I just created a bunch of rows. So if you look at this, I broke it down into columns of 4, and that's the variable we're working with here. At the end, I just, in this desktop script, I just used the editor to show the joined header and the grid data. So if we do that over time, take a look at it, it looks like this. If we format that nicely, it comes out the same way. You can see I've got 4 columns of data every single time. Okay, so to turn that into a CGI script, just take all that code and we call it create JSON.cgi. So we got some boilerplate. We're not really going to use any submitted data, anything read from the CGI input, but we could, for example, change the number of columns if we wanted to, and take that from the submitted data if we wanted to. The rest of the script is just the exact same script that you saw in the desktop version. Now we're just running it as a CGI application and printing it out at the end. Okay, so let's take a look at that. It's the exact same script that's in our CGI bin folder. So the script that we're going to work with is JavaScript file, which we're going to paste directly into Builder. And let's take a look at here. Rebol create JSON, I think, is the one. I believe that's what we called it here. So it's going to go call that function. And again, all we've got in this little script is a tree grid. That's the only thing that's in the user interface. And the Ajax call is going to that script. We're returning it and unserializing it just like we did. And so this code was basically copied, mostly cleaned up quite a bit, but basically just copied and pasted from that grid script. Demo script, we'll go back here and run it. And so now the data is not coming from a red file, but it's actually coming from that script. And if you remember what we saw down here, let's bring that up again. Here's our create JSON CGI. So we have 3 columns. I'm going to change that. This is actually the live CGI file that's running on our server in the CGI bin folder. So I'm going to change that to columns 4, and the script now is going to output JSON with 4 columns. So when the script reads it, reads the header differently, and now we've got 4 columns of data. That comes back up, and we got 4 columns. And of course, we could break those 24 items up into any number of columns. Let's try 6 columns. And so this is all happening live, just based on the output of the Rebol script. And the way this was, if we look at the page source here, the way this script worked, I didn't really have much, or actually if we look at the data, so we didn't really put the header in. We're relying on the Rebol script to tell us our column format, and the column format doesn't say that. I think this is all just text, so it basically does the sorting alphabetically here. So if you look at that, it's alphabetically sorted, but if we set the column type to number or to date or to any other data type, it'll sort it appropriately. But that gives you a good idea about how to take data from a Rebol server script and put it into a grid, which can be really useful for business applications. So at this point, I think you've seen enough to understand how to get the data back and forth. To understand all that's in Sigma Builder, there's just a fantastic array of documentation and files. So, for doing just about anything that you can imagine with the user interface, this thing really has all sorts of simple. Here's a drag and drop example with some stacks. You can move things around, and it gives you a really good idea here of some of the tabs and stacks that are available. We've got layout components, just all sorts of really great little browser interface. For example, beautiful menus. Here's an example of a different kind of menu. You can put all sorts of useful little tools right in there. We've got all sorts of useful like color picker and date picker, and they're really nicely designed tools. And of course, any of these applications you can bring up right in the builder and see what the code is for them. Look at the code view, or look at the items themselves in the visual builder, mess around with them and see how they work. See exactly what the format is, copy and paste into your own apps and get going that way, package them on your own. You can also directly in the builder, you can pick up a bunch of these samples. These samples, these code snippets, are actually another part of the documentation. So you can see there's a bunch of little code snips here. It shows you basically how to use any of the main UI widgets that are provided by jsLinb, and which are all provided in the builder. And that's actually part of another application here in the documentation. So this gives you a good idea of what's available. Perhaps the most important part of the documentation are these couple apps that are up here. The Code Snippets app basically shows you all those little scripts that you can pull up when you load scripts. And so these are all nice little examples that show you how to use each of the UI components, all the different kinds of variations. And this is actually all a jsLinb application. This was created with Visual Builder, so it has all the same kind of layout. We can do layout things that we want here. It's got a nice little jsLinb has a beautiful little code formatter, so you can pop code in it, it'll display it nicely. And that's the code that creates all of this little application up here. And of course, you can open it up in the UI builder and mess with it. But if you just want to copy and paste code, you can do it directly in the CodeSnip application. So that's a great way to sort of get started with using each of these UI widgets. You've got like a date widget. I use a progress bar. Click on that, and of course you can open that up in the builder, or you can just look at it here nicely formatted. And it's got examples of just about everything that you'll need to use. A bunch of different layouts, for example, in the layout example. You can see how these work. You can get the code for it, and all of that code again is down here. And open it in the builder if you want. And other things like, for example, validating input and formatting input. So if you want to see how to do anything that's contained in the builder, this is a good place to start. Once you've kind of looked through the applications and looked at the code and gotten used to using the builder, it's a great way to do it. And then finally, and probably most importantly, is this little application that gives the API a complete run through. So every single thing that is in jsLinb, including the AJAX functions, there are 3 AJAX functions. The Linb AJAX basically tells you here, this is all the documentation you need for every single thing in jsLinb for all the APIs. So you can see the limb.ajax function that we have used. It shows you the format, tells you what it can handle. This can handle get post between the current domain. It shows you the parameters you can use, and then it shows you all the properties and the methods and the things that are inherited, all the inherited methods from all the other classes that it inherits from, and so on. So this is fully documented, and one of the really great things about this is that it'll show you some code for just about everything. So let's look at some of the UI. So we want to look at how a button works. I can see how all of these methods and properties, first of all, are available, all the events that are available to it. They're just an enormous number of properties and events that we can use. So for example, if you want to see this, and the really fantastic thing about this is there must be thousands of these little examples in here. It shows you how to use each of those methods or properties or events. And so you have some code for just about every part of the API, and you can run it right here in this little API viewer. So this sort of completes everything you need if you're not sure how anything works. And that's actually all tied into the visual builder. When we're in the builder, you can click on any part of this. Let's say we go into the properties, and it will bring up that visual builder, or the viewer, the API viewer, right in the place where that property or that event option is, and you get some code. So that basically gives everything you need to really work with the builder in a nice, all integrated way. So it's definitely something that you need to check out if you're going to play with this and use it. The code snippets is fantastically useful to sort of get started and see how little bits of code work. And then the API fully documents everything, and you've got so much code in there. It just shows you everything you need. And then these fantastic applications really give you an idea of how to do things. There's actually another whole page here with some more materials. So for things like using I/O, like the Ajax, and it's important to see Linb actually has 3 different types, and if you look at the API viewer, you'll see what they all are. We have the one we were using, the Ajax. That's for same domain. If you're running an application, you need to get data from the same domain. But these others also do cross-domain, so it's got the ability to do cross-domain. The API explains exactly how they all work. You can see how you thread together complicated interactions between different Ajax requests. The documentation on this is just fantastic. And if you really look at the GUI tools, you see it's really usable. One thing to know about this, finally, among all the topics, is that this is an old version of what was eventually named Cross UI. There are quite a few versions of jsLinb and the Visual Builder. If you go search for GitHub and some of the versions of jsLinb, you'll find we're using version 2.02. I don't think it's set here. I think on the page you'll see it's version 2.02. That's what we downloaded. There are versions, LGPL versions of the builder, all the way up to version 4. I really prefer this little older version just because it's a little simpler, but version 4 does have some features. One of the nicest things about the newer versions, and that LPL version 4 still has this feature, it does code folding, and most importantly, IntelliSense. So when you're typing in your code editor, in the newer versions, even before they renamed it to Cross UI, the newer versions, version 4 especially, has a great little IntelliSense. So you don't really even need that whole API viewer. You can just sort of type, and as you type, it comes up with all the possibilities, or you can search for all the possibilities of any event or property or method that applies to whatever you're typing in. So fantastically, really a simple way to be able to learn the code. I just prefer to use the code as it is and look at the API as I go. But a couple other features in the newest version, Cross UI, they've got some drawing tools. And if you download this, it's free for. This is free for personal use, and I think it's like $300 or so for for commercial use, $399. the RAD desktop. One of the really big things that the RAD desktop does is it has a built-in, they call it a prototyping um, ability, and lets you do a lot of these things without even writing any code. You can just sort of click on things and choose between what options are available, and you don't really even have to write the code. That's such a really neat little thing. It saves some time and saves you from having to learn a lot of the API while you're doing things. You can actually start building without even digging into the API too much and really build applications. This downloads as a Node WebKit package for each of the desktop platforms. One of the reasons I like the old builder is I can just run this in a server on any platform, including mobile, and get the entire package. But this downloads. We'll take a really quick look at it. Cross UI. It's the newest version. That's what they're supporting commercially at this point. As far as I know, I don't know if there's any support for the old version, but for my needs, it's not necessary. But if you want to use this commercially and get their support, and one of the things you see when you download, you get the Cross UI cookbook, which actually is really helpful, and most of it applies to this old version of jsLinb and the builder that we're using. It's a great little document that explains, for example, if you want to learn about Ajax and how it implements Ajax, how you work with Ajax. It's a great way to read about it, and it explains a lot more about how to use the system. And of course, this is for the newer version of Cross UI, but it's still a really good document to read. And this little application is a Node WebKit application, and so you can build this. It's got a couple other features I just want to show you, specifically for deploying. So our deployment options in the old Sigma builder, the one that I've been showing you all the time, basically, you can save these things. You can either save the JavaScript if you want to just save it and edit it and bring it back up, copy and paste it, maybe bring it to another machine. Or you can deploy an HTML file if you already have the runtime on your system, or you can package the whole thing. So all these things are for web deploys. But you can package these things using Cordova. That's the PhoneGap toolkit. And Cross UI has that built in. It also will deploy directly to desktop, and actually does a cross deploy. You can. So here's the Cross UI. And it's another nice thing about Cross UI is it's got a project manager. The Sigma one does too, but this is much more powerful, with a lot more examples built in. And let's see here. We'll just do a application here. You can see that order management application. If you look at the deploy options, here's your little run button. This is the equivalent of the run button in the previous one. If you look at the deploy options up here, you can deploy to web, which is basically our zip option like we had before. So I'm just running this. This is the Cross UI version of this is a really old machine I'm on. I'm on a Windows what is it? Windows XP from more than 10 years ago, so this is running a little slow. That's also one of the things I really like about the older version is this was made for machines about 10 years ago, and it just runs absolutely quickly. So some of the newer versions of Cross UI I noticed on these old machines and on really small, like I have an Android 2.3 device, it's a little slow. It still runs, but it's just noticeably a little bit more laggy. Here are the deploy options. Do the web deploy. That's basically the same as the zip deploy thing we have in the older builder. And then you have all of these other option deploys and a mobile platform deploy, which connects directly to Cordova or PhoneGap server. Upload your file, and you get a nice, nice little app downloaded in. You get an APK file for Android, or if you want to download an iOS app, which you can deploy right to the store or through your own servers. and everything that Cordova handles. So, all the things, all the like Windows Mobile and any other mobile platform supported by Cordova, the WebOS and Blackberry and anything else that Cordova supports. Of course, you can do that. That's just a nice little integrated deploy option. But you can either use your own, account, and you're actually using your own account here. By default, they put in their account, but you can use your own account, and you can do that on your own. Or you can even download Cordova, install it with Node.js, and build your applications for whatever platform you want, so that you get your APKs, and you can do that directly with the output of the Sigma Ajax builder. So, and you can package it in Node WebKit also. So not necessary, but a nice little feature, and all those features together, the no-code builder, the prototyping builder, the editing features, IntelliSense, the deploy options, and commercial support if you need it. All those things are a good reason to look at Cross UI. But for my needs, this thing is super fast and runs anywhere. So hopefully that gives you a good run through of how to do not just the code, but use the entire system. If you have questions, leave a message for me on rebelforum.com.